We have a guest here in the studio as well, Mr. Gürkan Kumbaroğlu, who is a professor at Boğaziçi University. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us on this special transmission. Now, like our correspondent said, these elections are like no other. Many unprecedented developments took place in the lead-up to the election day. First and foremost, what are your thoughts on this day? I'm sure you must have followed previous U.S. elections. How different do you think this election is?
It's not only the election, it's also a year like no other, right, with the coronavirus pandemics. And I think that makes the big difference this year. In 2016, the polls, again, were a few points against Trump, right, in favor of Hillary Clinton, but then Trump won. It might be possible that we see the same thing again, but now I think usually the polls are more in favor of Biden, a few percent points larger. And I think that the major effect there is the pandemic's effect. Because this has been a stressful, challenging time for the world as a whole, but for the United States in particular. And that's my thought, that this pandemic time makes this election a very special and stressful one. And it's because of the pandemic, actually, that the postal votes now are much more than they used to be, early votes and postal votes, and that it is now, some states have now last day of voting by post, and this will take time for these votes to come in and to get counted. So probably if the difference, the gap between the two candidates is not small enough, if it's not a large gap, then it will take some time until we have a better feeling of who won.
Right. Now, the question of the day is, who is going to be the next president of the United States? Is it going to be incumbent President Donald Trump, or will he be replaced by former U.S. Vice President? What are your predictions? I know it's hard to guess.
That's a big lottery question, yes. It's difficult to say, but I'm an energy economist. Actually, I'm not an economist. I'm the president of the Turkish Association for Energy Economics and the past president of the International. So therefore, I'm in the energy economics world, following developments quite closely. So what I can say from the energy perspective, with Trump's energy policy, the United States, with all the oil and gas industry and all the shale revolution taking place, the United States became a net exporter in energy. Now, this change has economic implications on the macroeconomy as a whole, very positive economic implications. I think it's a major pillar of Trump's campaign to make America great again. That was the 2016 big headline, right, when Trump was elected president.
Okay, I think you made a great point here, energy, and this just popped up the idea of the usage of fossil fuels.
Exactly.
President Trump
that's what I was coming to. Now, Joe Biden has a different perspective in energy, not fossil fuels.
He's for climate change.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. So it's a very different policy priority. And what the Americans will choose, we will see. But it will make a big difference in terms of energy policy.
Now, let me ask you a million-dollar question. Who do you think would be better in terms of energy for the world?
Well, for the world, in terms of energy, and when we talk about energy, I'm thinking about sustainability. And when we talk about sustainability, there are three pillars of sustainability. An economic pillar, an environmental pillar, and a social pillar. So in the economic pillar, you see more the fossil fuels, but in the environmental and social pillar, you don't see the fossil fuels, you see the non-fossil fuels, the renewables. In terms of environmental issues and social well-being and environmental well-being, it's obviously the renewable revolution to avoid climate change and all the greenhouse gases. The Democrat policy is then in favor of this. I mean, United States pulled out from the Paris Agreement, right? Now, probably if Joe Biden wins the election, probably United States will get back in. I don't know.
I guess this is the expectation. If Vice President Biden becomes the President of the United States, he might undo many things which President Donald Trump did. Now, another key question I have
and foreign policy as well, of course. So
correct.
Major implications there on foreign policy. So therefore, and all these controversial aspects make this election very special and stressful, and it's probably one of the elections with highest rate of participation now, record level of participation.
Right,
in the
and
US.
now we will see.
That's a good thing, actually.
Correct, and now we'll see if this high participation is going to, whether it is going to play out in the favor of Democrats or Republicans. Now, this leads to my next question. Now, President Donald Trump is someone who is not a big fan of climate change. He, if I may say, does not believe in climate change. He has adopted policies which are against climate change. To what extent are Donald Trump's claims regarding climate change correct?
Well, there is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and around this convention, each year there is a conference of parties. Thousands of people from all over the world gather together at this conference of parties to discuss this. And actually, the Paris Agreement is an outcome of one of these conference of parties. And then there is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which produces a report every 4 to 5 years, sometimes 6 years, an assessment report. And this assessment report is several volumes and large volumes. It elaborates on the scientific basis, on climate change mitigation, on adaptation to climate change. And when we look at these scientific reports, I mean, the IPCC reports are accepted to be the most up-to-date and reliable source on climate change. And they are prepared with hundreds, thousands of scientists from all over the world. So looking at the reports, the international reports and the international agenda, both around the UNFCCC and then with the IPCC, the level of scientific understanding is very high, that climate change is a man-made reality. So given this fact and given the implications that are coming with climate change and the economic damage to all the countries that are coming with climate change all over the world. It's a global problem. It's not a local problem. So in this sense, I believe it's an important issue to tackle.
Then, Professor, what do you think is pulling President Donald Trump back from implementing policies to tackle climate change? Is it the fossil fuel industry?
Of course, it's the fossil fuel industry. I mean, it's not only oil and gas. I mean, the shale revolution in the United States which made the US become a net exporter in energy, that shale revolution actually contributed to some extent to the reduction of pollutant emissions, because many coal-fired power plants now were replaced by natural gas-fired power plants. There was a substitution, which is, in terms of emission, a good thing, because gas is about half of the emission factor that coal would otherwise produce. For the same amount of energy that is produced, it would generate almost double the emissions. But then coal is exported to third countries. It's another income for an exporting country.
Right.
But then the pollution that occurs at the third country that makes use of coal as an energy source, that problem, that is not alone a problem of that country, it's a global problem. So it comes back to the exporting country as well, and I think we all need to be very careful about this. So, and actually, it's not stopping the use of fossil fuels, but it's like bringing economic markets to work, in the sense that carbon markets would promote the use of low carbon energy sources, make it more attractive, make it economically more competitive. And that would bring things, make a movement towards a more sustainable world. So that's my thought, that this sustainable movement is important. Electromobility is part of this sustainability movement. And actually, the United States also does have quite a bit of research and market penetration in terms of electromobility, as well as hydrogen vehicles. So it could also be a market leader in sustainability.
All right. Now, let's broaden the discussion a little bit. Let's talk about foreign policy, especially when it comes to energy. Now, I understand there are many countries across the world actively working together to reinforce sustainable energy. Like you mentioned, the United Nations is also working on it. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the main agendas of the UN General Assembly this year was to talk about sustainable energy as well. Now, help us understand, to what extent are these efforts by the United Nations providing results? Are we seeing some sort of results when it comes to having sustainable energy in the world?
I mean, the political process of the sustainability movement is currently taken up in terms of leadership by the European Union. So it could be the United States, but United States dropped out. Now, to what extent we see this sustainable movement affect the current agenda, it is difficult to evaluate, and it differs from country to country. And there is for sure a political aspect on leadership, on determination, and also an economic aspect. So typically, there is this dilemma. And there has been all over the time this huge argumentation between the developing world and the developed world.
Right.
So that, I mean, one of the two is historically responsible with the industrializing revolution and very high per capita emissions. But then there is this developing world with very low per capita emissions. But now, in the sustainability change, in terms of installing new technologies that are more expensive, but less polluting, they have difficulty. So they need to be assisted. And that was a good part of the Kyoto Protocol with the Kyoto flexibility mechanisms. It's currently unclear what's going to happen now after the agreement, Paris Agreement, with all this international collaboration and trade. I think there is that international collaboration towards a more sustainable world. There is still much to do there.
Now, Professor, stay with us. I'm going to request my director to show President Donald Trump's climate change policy. I believe we have some infographics on that, if our director can bring it on the screen. All right, so my director is telling me he's going to give it very shortly. Now, right now, the eyes of the world are on the upcoming on the U.S. elections, which is underway right now. Now, Professor, if I can stand and talk about these policies here. Now, President Donald Trump, like we have spoken, initiated the U.S. withdrawal from the 2015 Paris Agreement. Trump weakened the Clean Power Plan as well. Trump also altered the National Environmental Policy Act. Now, these are the things which have already been done by President Donald Trump. Now, in terms of rectifying, if I may say, whatever President Donald Trump did to U.S. climate change policy, how likely is it for that to happen? Do you think Joe Biden is someone who can rectify President Donald Trump's mistakes when it comes to climate change?
Well, Joe Biden has a totally different vision of energy, and then he can, in my opinion, he can bring a change. Now, what impacts will that change have on U.S. economy and global efforts? That is another big thing. I mean, it's not only U.S. If U.S. comes back into the Paris Agreement and takes up the political leadership, becomes active there, it's a totally different situation.
Professor,
for the
this is what I wonder now, if I may interject here. I mean, don't you think it's very unhealthy for America as a democracy to have the next president undo whatever the previous president did? Because certainly this is what President Donald Trump did. He is going after the Obamacare. He's going after the Paris climate change agreement. And now assuming Vice President Biden wins the election and he becomes the next president of the United States, he's also going to undo whatever President Donald Trump did. So how would we see consistency when it comes to U.S. presidency?
Yeah. I mean, that's a very good question, because I mean, the United States was believed to be one of the most stable and robust countries, and everybody was thinking, the presidential change wouldn't bring much of a change in the national policy, because there are all these institutions, etc. But then President Trump is a different personality, and he comes up with his executive orders and everything. He did bring a change, indeed. He was able to do
now, whether
this.
it was a good change or not, that
now this the
remains...
American nation will decide.
Correct.
Today they decide, and we will see the results, what they will decide. But that's right, and this will, again, if Biden comes in, but it depends on the results of the Senate and the House of Representatives.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
If Biden gets the majority in both, he will be able to undo things. But he may become president and not be able to undo things as well.
Correct. Now, Professor, I remember you mentioning that you're not an economist, but you are an energy economist. So I do have one question about trade, if you can give your insights on that. Let's bring it on the screen again, the infographic we had. Let's bring it again on the screen. Okay. Now, Trump quit the Trans-Pacific Partnership in 2017. Trump's America's First trade policy spark a tit-for-tat tariff war with China. Trump renegotiated the 1994 North America Free Trade Agreement, known as NAFTA. I mean, President Donald Trump appears to be someone who is not a big fan of free trade.
Yes. So,
am I wrong?
Yeah, and actually, I think President Trump and his team, it's more a national interest-oriented policy. So when they study those trade agreements, what are the benefits? What are the disbenefits of these trade agreements? What is the historical data? How much has the United States benefited from this agreement, and how much has the United States given away because of this agreement? So probably I would think it's a viewpoint that is more financial.
Okay.
That's what I think. But then there are other aspects.
When you say more financial, you mean more financially beneficial for the United States, not for the world, correct?
Exactly. That's the key point. That's what I want to get through with the national viewpoint. But then it's the United States. It's the
most powerful country in the world.
Exactly.
Right.
So then that's the big difference there. It's not just one country that has a closed economy where you can close things and then become the leader of the world.
All right. Now, Professor, before I let you go, I would like to get your final thoughts on the U.S. election. What would you like to say?
It's exciting, I would like to say. So I spent the first half of the year in the United States, in Washington, D.C. It started as a very nice experience, but then the coronavirus pandemics was not the best experience. It's not the best experience nowhere in the world, but leading up to the elections was what all the things that have happened in the United States. In terms of what I have personally experienced, it was not there were challenging, difficult times in the U.S. in particular,
right.
Because of the skyrocketing numbers and because of the health system collapsing and because of the interruption in supply chain, in food, etc. I think President Trump may have lost some of the percent points he would normally have received
if
just because of the pandemics, coronavirus pandemics. And on top of that, then the incident with George Floyd happened throughout the country, this blurred out protests, etc. All this actually also has contributed to the stress that we see in the elections today. So the last thing I would like to say is let's hope for the best for the United States and for the whole world, because the elections in the United States have implications for the whole world.
Right. May the best win. Professor, thank you very much for joining us on this special transmission. We really appreciate your analysis and your taking out the time.